There's a conversation that happens in financial planning that almost nobody wants to have. It goes like this. How long do we plan for? And the client says something like, well, my dad made it to 78, so, and the advisor nods and plugs in 82 to be safe. And everybody moves on. But here's what the conversation is actually about and why avoiding it is quietly destroying retirement income plans across the country. Living longer than you planned for is not a blessing in a poorly engineered income plan. It's the risk that ends it. Today, we talk about longevity, the real version. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to The Income Standard, where retirement income is designed, not guessed. I am Tod Long, and this is the show for people who are done accumulating and ready to start engineering. Let's get into it. Longevity risk is the risk of outliving your money. But that framing is too simple, actually, and it lets advisors off the hook consistently. The more precise framing is this. Longevity risk is the risk that your income architecture has an expiration date your life doesn't respect. Most retirement plans are modeled to age 82, 85, maybe 90 years old. Those numbers feel conservative because they feel longer than most people expect to live. And for any individual person, they may be right. But here's what the actuarial tables actually show. For a married couple, both age 65, there's a 50% probability that at least one spouse lives past 90, and a 1 in 4 chance that at least one lives past 95. Now, that's not trail risk. That is a coin flip. A plan built to age 85 has a structural failure point built right into it. It's not a question of if, only when. And the problem compounds. The closer a plan gets to its expiration date, the fewer options exist to extend it. Repositioning assets, optimizing income streams, restructuring the floor, all of those options shrink as the portfolio shrinks and age advances. The time to engineer longevity protection is before you need it, not at 84 when the model runs out, at 60 or at 65 when you still have the assets and the options to build a floor that doesn't expire. Here's the reframe that changes how you think about longevity. Longevity is not a probability problem. It's a design problem. The question, how long will I live, is unanswerable. You can't know. And building your retirement income around a prediction about something unknowable is structurally fragile. The question, does my income architecture have an expiration date? That's answerable right now with your current numbers. Portfolio withdrawals have an expiration date. At some depletion rate, the portfolio runs out. The math is deterministic. Given a balance, a withdrawal rate, and a return assumption, you can calculate exactly when. Guaranteed lifetime income does not have an expiration date. A Social Security benefit doesn't expire at 85. An annuity with a lifetime income rider doesn't expire at 90. Those income streams were specifically designed to continue regardless of how long you live. So the question isn't about how long you'll live. The question is whether your income will outlive you regardless of the answer. Most people have a hybrid income architecture, some guaranteed, some portfolio dependent. The longevity risk lives entirely in the portfolio dependent portion. The guaranteed portion is fine. It will keep arriving. The exposure is in the gap. How much of your monthly income depends on a portfolio that has a calculable expiration date? That's the number that needs to be on paper. I want to spend a few minutes on why the 85 assumption persists and what it actually costs. Financial planning software typically allows advisors to set a planning horizon. Most advisors default to somewhere between 82 and 90, with 85 being the most common. The reasoning is usually some version of that's above average life expectancy, so it's conservative. Here's the problem with that logic. Average life expectancy is the age at which half of the population has died. If you're building a plan to the average, you're building a plan with a 50% failure rate built into the math. That's not conservative. That's median. But the deeper problem isn't even the age assumption. It's what the age assumption allows the advisor to avoid. If the plan is modeled to 85, you never have to answer the question, what happens to the client at 88 or 92 or 96? The model simply doesn't go there. The conversation doesn't go there. The planning doesn't go there. And so the client goes into retirement with a plan that looks solid because it was never stress tested against the scenario that's a coin flip for any 65-year-old couple. The income standard models to 95, not because we expect every client to live to 95, but because a floor that holds to 95 holds to any age below it. And a floor that fails at 88 might fail 5 years earlier than that in a bad sequence. Modeling the 85 is not conservative planning. It's planning that stops asking questions at a convenient point. If your current plan has a planning horizon, go find it. Ask your advisor, what does this plan look like at 90, at 95? If the answer is vague, or if the model doesn't go there, you don't have a longevity plan. You have a plan with a built-in expiration date you haven't seen yet. The income standard stress tests every income architecture to age 95 minimum, not as a worst case, as a baseline requirement. What that means in practice, every guaranteed income source is projected to 95. Every portfolio withdrawal is modeled to show the depletion age. Every gap between guaranteed floor and non-negotiable expenses is identified as a longevity exposure point. The goal is not to show you a terrifying number. The goal is to show you whether your floor holds, and if it doesn't, where it breaks and by how much. For most people, the longevity fix is smaller than they expect because the issue usually isn't total assets. It's the portion of those assets that are structured for lifetime income versus the portion that's in a portfolio with a withdrawal clock running. Repositioning 15 to 20% of a portfolio into guaranteed lifetime income often closes the longevity exposure entirely. Not because 15 to 20% is a large amount of money, but because that's what's needed to close the gap between guaranteed income and non-negotiable expenses. Longevity stops being a financial threat the moment your guaranteed income floor cannot expire. We are halfway through this episode, and this is actually the right place to pause. We've been talking about longevity as a design problem. The question isn't how long you'll live. The question is whether your income architecture can outlive you regardless of the answer. The longevity risk calculator on the resources page at theincomestandard.com shows you exactly what your plan looks like when you model it past 85. You enter your current age, your retirement age, your portfolio balance, your monthly withdrawal, and your expected return. The calculator runs 3 scenarios. What happens to your portfolio at your expected rate of return? What happens if returns disappoint slightly? And what happens when an income floor reduces what the portfolio has to carry? For each scenario, it shows you the age at which your portfolio depletes and how many years short of 95 that is. Most people running this for the first time find that their plan depletes somewhere around between 82 and 89 years old. That's not a failure of planning. It's a gap between what was modeled and what longevity actually requires. If you're driving right now, come back to this later. If you have 4 minutes, run your numbers before the second half of this show. Theincomestandard.com, resources, longevity risk calculator. I'll be here when you get back. Let me walk through a real planning scenario. Names obviously have been changed to protect their privacy. So let's talk about Patricia. She's widowed and recently retired. She's 67 years old. Her husband passed away 2 years ago. She has $1.1 million in a traditional IRA, her own Social Security of $24,000 a year, which is roughly $2,000 a month, and a non-negotiable monthly expense of $4,200. Her advisor had run projections showing her plan as on track to age 88. Now, Patricia felt a little bit uneasy, not because she distrusted her advisor, but because 88 felt arbitrary. Her mother lived to 96 and her aunt to 99. When we ran the income architecture analysis, here's what we found. Patricia's guaranteed income is the Social Security at $24,000 a year, $2,000 a month, the non-negotiable expenses of $4,200 a month. Her floor gap is $2,200 a month, or $26,400 a year. 52% of her monthly floor not covered by guaranteed income. At $1.1 million, pulling $26,000 annually to close that gap means roughly 2.4% portfolio draw rate, just for her non-negotiable expenses. Add modest discretionary spending, and her effective draw rate was close to about 4%. Now, we ran our plan to 95. At a 4% draw rate and 6% average return, which is relatively optimistic assumption, her portfolio depleted at 89. 2 years past what her advisor had modeled as on track, but 4 years short of the minimum longevity target and potentially 12 to 15 years short of where her family history suggested she might land. Now, Patricia was not in a crisis, but her plan had a structural failure point at 89, and she had a reasonable probability of living 10 to 15 years past that. So here's what we built. We repositioned $220,000 of our IRA, which is 20% of her total, into a fixed index annuity with a lifetime income rider. At her age, that generated approximately $1,800 a month in guaranteed lifetime income beginning immediately. Her new guaranteed income picture, Social Security at $2,000 a month plus the annuity income at $1,800 a month, that's $3,800 combined. Non-negotiable floor, $4,200 a month. Remaining gap, $400 a month. That $400 gap, which is $4,800 a year, is easily covered by the $880,000 remaining portfolio without meaningful longevity risk. At 4% draw on $880,000, that's roughly $35,000 a year in available annual income, of which only $4,800 is obligated to the floor. So Patricia's plan now models to 100 without portfolio depletion. Her floor, the $3,800 in guaranteed monthly income, cannot expire. If she lives to 96, like her mother, her essential expenses are covered for life. She repositioned 20% of her assets to protect 100% of her essential income forever. That's not expensive, that's efficient. Patricia's situation isn't unusual. Strong balance, reasonable withdrawal rate, projections that look fine to 88, and a 1 in 3 probability of outliving the plan. If your projection stops before 95, you're not seeing the full picture of your longevity exposure. The review does the math with your actual numbers. I want to describe what portfolio depletion at 88 actually looks like for someone like Patricia, not as a projection, but as a lived experience. It doesn't start with a number hitting zero. It actually starts much earlier and much quieter. At 82, Patricia's portfolio is down $400,000. Not gone, still substantial. But the withdrawal rate that felt manageable at 1.1 now feels different. She starts making small adjustments. She cancels a trip she'd been planning for a while, delays a home repair, thinks twice before writing a check for a grandchild's college fund. None of those are emergencies, but each one is a contraction. And each contraction signals to Patricia that her financial situation has a direction, and the direction is down. At 85, a health event happens, not catastrophic, hospitalization, rehabilitation, 6 months of income, 6 months of in-home care, out-of-pocket it costs roughly about $60,000. The portfolio absorbs it. There's no choice. At 88, the projection line hits zero, but Patricia is still here. And the decisions that happen in the years before that line, the caregiving, the housing, the medical choices, those are all made in the shadow of a depleting portfolio. Now contrast that with the plan we built. At 88, Patricia's $3,800 a month and guaranteed income is still arriving. It will arrive at 92, at 96, as long as she lives. The portfolio is still there, smaller, but not obligated to carry the floor. The health event at 85 costs money, but it doesn't fundamentally alter her income picture. The difference between those two lives at 88 is not the $220,000 that was repositioned. It's what that $220,000 was structured to do. A floor that doesn't expire doesn't just protect income, it protects dignity, the ability to make decisions from security rather than scarcity. Now, if you've been avoiding the longevity conversation because planning for 95 means admitting you might actually be there, that's the conversation to stop avoiding. A floor built now doesn't require certainty about how long you will live. It requires certainty that however long that is, the income will be there. The longevity conversation is the one most people avoid because it requires sitting with uncertainty in a direct way. But avoidance is not protection. The Income Standard Review includes a longevity stress test. We model your income architecture to age 95 and show you exactly where the floor holds and where it doesn't. With your numbers, not a hypothetical. For most people, the fix is smaller than they expect because longevity risk isn't usually about how much money you have. It's about how your income is structured. This isn't a conversation for people who are curious about longevity risks in the abstract. It's for people who are willing to look at their own numbers, their actual guaranteed income, their actual gap, and act on what they find. If that's you, the review is the right next step. Schedule your longevity stress test at theincomestandard.com because the best time to build a floor that lasts forever is while you still have the assets to build it right. That is the income standard for this week, folks. If this episode gave you a framework you didn't have before, share it with someone who actually needs it. Forward it to a friend who's 5 years from retirement and still thinking in terms of balance sheets instead of income architecture. And if you found yourself thinking about your own income floor while listening, like what's guaranteed, what's not, and what that gap might be, that's the signal. That's when this review makes sense. The review is waiting for you at theincomestandard.com. Again, that is theincomestandard.com. There's no cost, there's no pitch, just measurement. I'm Tod Long. We'll talk to you next week.